and today we're reading from the second book in the Secret Adventures of Rolo series. This is the Chilvester Passage, and the chapter I'd like to read, with help from Rolo, is all about the Welsh prince Llewellyn and his faithful hound. Rolo, stop, you're not helping. A few weeks later, Athelstan summoned me via Bubo the owl. I looked at her with a new respect, willing her to spin her head round or cough up a pellet, but of course she never did, and she was working. Julia told me that this was to be a very important mission, way back to the 13th century, to a place called Gwynedd in North Wales. I asked if Chickpea might be able to come along, as she was dying to go on a time-travelling adventure ever since she'd found out about the Athelstan tree. Julia didn't think it would be a problem, but flew back to check with Athelstan while I alerted Chickpea. I didn't have to go and knock for her. She was already hanging around outside the garden gate. By that time, the owl and her tiny rider had reappeared, with confirmation that, as Chickpea had been instrumental in saving the Athelstan tree, it was all right for her to accompany me on this occasion. We had already found another pink ball so that she would be able to enter the time tunnel, and we were soon on our way to the foxhole entrance on Treacle Bolly. I'd worked out during my daily walks that the foxhole was not that far underground from the main entrance of the time tunnel through the Athelstan tree. That entrance was still blocked, and so I first had to get my instructions from Athelstan via Julia, and then use the foxhole entrance to access the time tunnel. Chickpea was as excited as I had been on my first time-travelling adventure, and the two of us powered through the tunnel, adrenaline rushing, wondering what was in store for us at the other end. "Steady on, you two," remonstrated Julia as we raced neck and neck. At the end of the tunnel, however, I slowed right down and prepared to exit with some trepidation. I'd come to learn that travelling back to different times could be quite dangerous. You never knew what you were going to meet at the other end. Chickpea, in her innocence, was not scared at all, and eager to taste adventure. She kept urging me on. I shouldered her out of the way. Barely setting paw outside the tunnel, I was set upon by a monstrous beast. All went dark, and I could only assume the assailant had my head clamped firmly in its mouth. I could taste hot, slobbery breath, and had a flashback to the lion dogs that had chased me into the Athelstan tree, and I thought I was done for as my life flashed in front of my eyes. Luckily, Chickpea was there. She was small but mighty, and totally unafraid of whatever it was that was trying to kill her companion. Without giving thought to her own safety, she jumped on the beast's back and sunk her teeth into its hindquarters, and as the angry black shadow swung around to attack his assailant, I found the pressure of its jaws easing, and I managed to wriggle out of its grasp. Chickpea was still hanging off its back end, but she was quick-witted enough to remove her powerful little jaws once she knew I was free. The two of us shot back into the tunnel entrance, leaving the assailant howling and licking his wounds as he limped away. We heard a twig snap nearby, and were scared for a moment that it might be another beast, but instead we saw his face. His gentle features reminded me a bit of our friend and neighbour, Merlin. We cautiously stepped out from the tunnel entrance for a second time. Chickpea was right behind me. "Bore da," the hound spoke softly in Welsh. I recognised this greeting from my puppyhood and was able to respond. The hound introduced himself as Gellert, and he was very concerned for our well-being. He could see my neck was bleeding a little. We explained about the beast, and he thanked us for the warning. The kindly hound led us to a small clearing, where he showed us that he was watching over a human baby, whilst his royal master was out hunting. Chickpea put her paws up on the crib and leaned in, admiring the sleeping infant. Neither of us had seen such a tiny human baby before. Suddenly the black beast reappeared, springing from behind a tree and determined to avenge his wounds and his pride. He tipped the cradle up and the baby fell to the floor. Without hesitation, I threw my body underneath and managed to soften the infant's fall, and amazingly he didn't even wake up as I lay him gently on the ground. Whilst Gellert and Chickpea attacked the predator, I carefully manoeuvred the upended crib over the sleeping babe to shelter him. My intention was to keep the human baby secret and safe. Then I joined the melee. It didn't take the three of us very long to finish off the silent dark assassin. Gellert dealt the final death blow, biting the beast's neck, and the huge body slumped to the ground and lay there like a rug. Just at that moment, a trumpet blast heralded the return of Prince Llewellyn and his hunting party. Gellert was so pleased to hear his master's voice that he ran up to him, putting his big paws up on the prince's chest, and pushed his head forward, waiting for the familiar ear-rub greeting. Prince Llewellyn's eyes surveyed the scene, and all he could see was the upturned cradle and his beloved dog, whose jaws were dripping with blood, and he immediately jumped to the wrong conclusion. It was as if we were in a play. Time seemed frozen. None of us could move. The prince was the first to react. He unsheathed his sword, grabbed Gellert, and was about to kill his beloved dog by plunging his sword right through his ribcage, when the baby's muffled cries could be heard from beneath the crib. The spell was broken, and Chickpea couldn't stay back any longer. She ran forward and flipped the covering over to reveal the mewling baby. I jumped up at the prince and tugged at his sleeve, shouting that all was well. Gellert had slain the beast and saved the baby. Thank goodness. The prince lowered his sword arm, and released his hold of the startled hound. Prince Llewellyn listened to my explanation, and finally his eyes rested on the carcass of the slain beast. "A wolf!" he cried. "You brave dogs have saved my baby from this savage wolf." Phew, that was close. If we hadn't been there at that moment, I felt sure the prince would have done away with his dog. Instead, he called him Faithful Hound and publicly honoured his courage in saving the tiny heir to the throne. Chickpea and I sneaked off back to the time tunnel, leaving Gellert to enjoy the praise. "Nos da," I whispered, but it went unanswered. I like testing out languages. Once more I thought how lucky it was that I could communicate with humans on my time-travelling adventures. It was such a pity I couldn't do this in my daily life. "Quite enough excitement for one night, I think," I said to Chickpea, whose eyes were positively sparkling from the exhilaration of this adventure. We said goodnight to Yulia at the foxhole and went our separate ways, each to our own basket, before the sun rose and a new day dawned. So thank you very much for listening, and please join me again tomorrow when I shall read another chapter from the Secret Adventures of Rolo series. Thank you.